You know that moment when your card gets declined at the grocery store and suddenly your whole world tilts sideways? That happened to me last Tuesday at Whole Foods, and it changed everything. I was 73 years old, standing in the organic produce section with my canvas shopping bag. I'd come to buy ingredients for Mark's favorite chocolate chip cookies. My grandson was turning 16 next week, and I'd been making those cookies for his birthday every year since he was old enough to blow out candles. The cashier ran my debit card through the machine twice. Both times, the screen flashed red. Declined. Behind me, I could feel the impatience of other customers building. I fumbled for another card, my hands trembling, not from age, but from something deeper. Something that felt like the first crack in a foundation I'd thought was solid. 47 years I'd been managing money as a certified public accountant. I knew the exact balance in every one of my accounts. There should have been more than enough money for groceries. I paid with emergency cash and drove straight to First National Bank. Janet, the bank manager, pulled up my account and her eyebrows furrowed. A cruise to the Caribbean for $8,000. A 75-inch television for $3,000. Designer handbags, expensive dinners, luxury items that painted a picture of a lifestyle I'd never lived. The authorized user on my account, besides myself, was my son Kevin. I'd added him 3 years ago, after knee surgery. Just in case of emergencies. I'd thought then, well, something had happened to me, all right. I'd been robbed by my own flesh and blood. That evening, Kevin and Sarah showed up at my door unannounced. Their faces masks of worry that I now recognized as theater. Sarah carried a manila folder thick with papers. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "we noticed unusual activity on your account. We're worried someone might be taking advantage of you. At your age, you shouldn't have to deal with these complicated financial matters anymore." Kevin set power of attorney documents on my kitchen table. "To protect the family assets," he said, "you just need to sign here. And we'll handle everything from now on." "I need time to think about this," I told them, making my voice sound tired and uncertain. The next morning, Sarah appeared with coffee and pastries, claiming she wanted to help organize my paperwork. But I caught her photographing documents in my home office. Kevin called repeatedly about a real estate opportunity that required immediate action. The breaking point came Thursday, when Kevin tried to take my car keys, telling me someone my age shouldn't be driving anymore. I held those keys tight and looked my son in the eye. "As long as I can walk," I told him, "nobody has the right to take away my freedom." That night, I called my oldest friend Eleanor. After I told her what was happening, she said, "You need to teach them a lesson, Maggie. Not just get your money back, but get your dignity back too." The next morning, I called my attorney, Robert Davies. After reviewing the evidence, he laid out a plan. I would appear to give in partially, suggesting a trial run where Kevin managed household expenses for 1 month while we documented every expenditure. The trap was set beautifully. Within days of gaining access, Kevin and Sarah were spending like lottery winners. A red sports car, designer shopping, expensive dinners, weekend getaways. 3 weeks later, they threw a dinner party at the most expensive restaurant in town, inviting business partners and friends to show off their sudden affluence. I knew about the dinner party because my grandson Mark had mentioned it. He'd been increasingly uncomfortable with his parents' behavior and had started calling me more often. The night of their celebration, I put on my best navy dress and drove to Romano's with Eleanor and Robert. We arrived just as Kevin was preparing to pay the check for 8 people. I watched his face change as the server returned to whisper that his card was declined. He tried another card, then another. Sarah tried hers. Each attempt met the same result. That's when I made my entrance. I walked across that restaurant like I owned it. Eleanor and Robert flanking me. "Kevin," I said loud enough for neighboring tables to hear, "it looks like you're having trouble with your pocket money." I handed my credit card to the server. then placed two folders on the table. The first contained detailed records of every penny they'd spent in 3 weeks. $150,000, I announced. That's what you've managed to burn through in 21 days. The second folder contained legal documents from Robert. A choice. Sign a legally binding repayment agreement and return every luxury item, or face criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. Mark was there that night, watching his parents' humiliation unfold. When it was over, he came and stood beside my chair, his hand on my shoulder. That simple gesture meant more than any amount of money. Kevin and Sarah had no choice but to sign the agreement. The sports car was repossessed. Sarah's designer wardrobe returned to stores. But I didn't stop there. With Robert's help, I established the Reed Foundation for Elder Financial Protection. I used my story to educate other seniors about financial abuse warning signs, speaking at community centers, and funding a legal clinic for elderly victims. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of a cruise ship bound for Alaska. Not the Caribbean cruise Kevin had stolen, but one I'd chosen. Eleanor stood beside me as we watched whales breach in the distance. "They thought you were too old to fight back," Eleanor said, raising her coffee cup. But all they did was wake up a sleeping dragon. The cruise was everything Kevin's stolen vacation could never have been. It was freedom. It was choice. It was justice served cold, like the Alaskan air around us. When I returned, I sold my big house and moved somewhere smaller, closer to town. I kept only what brought happiness: books, my husband's piano, photo albums from better times. The rest went to charity or to Mark, who was preparing for college. Kevin and Sarah made their payments on schedule, $2,500 monthly, until the debt was cleared. They never missed a payment, but never called either, except when absolutely necessary. They'd lost more than money. They'd lost trust, respect, and the only parent Kevin had left who genuinely cared about his well-being. Mark visited every Sunday afternoon. We'd bake cookies together, using the same recipe for 16 years. One Sunday, while waiting for cookies to bake, he finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandma, do you hate them, Mom and Dad?" "No, honey," I told him. "I don't hate them, but I don't trust them anymore, either." Trust, once broken so completely, doesn't heal like a bone. It leaves scars that change every relationship afterward. A year later, legal proceedings were complete. Kevin and Sarah had repaid every stolen dollar plus interest and fees. The foundation was thriving, helping more seniors monthly recover assets and dignity. On a warm Tuesday evening, I sat in my garden reading foundation reports. We'd helped recover over $2 million for elderly abuse victims in our first year. More importantly, we'd helped them understand that being older doesn't mean being powerless. Eleanor called as the sun set. "Turn on Channel 7, she said. The local news was running a story about financial crimes against the elderly, featuring my conference speech. The reporter called me a champion for senior citizens who'd turned personal tragedy into community triumph. I watched myself on television. This 74-year-old woman with steel gray hair and laugh lines earned through decades of living. She looked strong, confident, like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. Later, I called Mark to see if he'd watched. He had, and I could hear pride in his voice when he said his friends at school had seen it too. "My grandmother is famous," he'd told them. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, the one who'd prioritized everyone else's comfort over her own dignity. She'd been good, but had been a victim too, spending so much time caring for others that she'd forgotten to care for herself. The woman in my bathroom mirror was different. Older, yes, but not diminished. She was older the way wine gets older, more complex and valuable with time. She'd learned that real love doesn't require setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. The foundation kept me busy in the best way. Every week brought new cases, opportunities to help people reclaim power and dignity. I'd become something unexpected at this life stage. An advocate, a teacher, a warrior for justice. What I had now was better than before. Authentic relationships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. A grandson who respected me enough to tell the truth. A best friend who'd stand by me in any storm. Work that mattered and made a difference. Most importantly, I had myself back, the real me, not the diminished version who'd spent years trying to earn love through sacrifice. This Margaret Reed didn't need anyone's approval to know her worth. On my 75th birthday, the foundation threw a party. The conference room was packed with people whose lives had been changed by our work. Mark gave a speech about his grandmother who'd taught him it's never too late to start over. Never too late to demand better treatment. Never too late to discover your own strength. Eleanor, now 77 and still sharp, raised her glass near evening's end. To Maggie Reed, she announced, who proved that the best revenge isn't getting mad or getting even, it's getting free. Everyone laughed and applauded. But I knew she was right. Freedom had been the real prize all along. Not the recovered money or satisfaction of consequences, but liberation from finally understanding my own value. Driving home, I passed my old house where I'd lived 30 years, raised Kevin, mourned my husband, almost let myself be convinced I was too old to manage my own life. The new owners had painted it yellow and planted sunflowers. It looked happy, alive in a way it never had, when sorrow and anxiety lived behind its walls. My current house was smaller but brighter, filled with things chosen because they brought joy rather than served someone else's needs. The refrigerator held food I actually liked. Bookshelves displayed novels I wanted to read. Walls were covered with travel photos, evidence of a life lived fully and deliberately. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with tea and the Foundation's annual report. We'd helped over 300 families recover more than $5 million. But numbers only told part of the story. The real victory was in letters from people who'd found their voices again, learned to trust their instincts, discovered that growing older doesn't mean becoming powerless. One letter particularly moved me, from a woman whose daughter had been draining her accounts for years. She wrote, "For so long, I thought being a good mother meant letting my daughter take whatever she wanted. Your story taught me that enabling bad behavior isn't love, it's harm. I've set boundaries now, and for the first time in years, I respect myself again." I finished my tea thinking about tomorrow's schedule. Speaking engagement, foundation meeting, dinner with friends. My calendar was full of choices I'd made for myself, activities that fed my soul rather than drained it. Before turning off the bedside lamp, I looked at the photo on my nightstand from that Alaska cruise, showing Eleanor and me with Aurora Borealis dancing behind us. We looked like what we were, two women who'd survived whatever life threw at them and come out stronger. I'd lived 75 years, and the last two had been among the best. Not because they'd been easy, but because they'd been honest. Not because everything went according to plan, but because I'd finally learned to make plans that served my interests. Sometimes people asked if I regretted how things ended with Kevin, if I wished I'd found a way to forgive and forget. But forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or putting yourself back in harm's way. Real forgiveness is letting go of anger while holding on to wisdom. I'd forgiven Kevin because carrying resentment was like drinking poison and expecting him to get sick. But I'd also learned from Kevin, good intentions aren't enough without healthy boundaries. Love without respect is just exploitation with a prettier name. Protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. As sleep came, I thought about that confused, hurt woman in the grocery store 2 years ago, fumbling for cash to pay for cookie ingredients. She couldn't have imagined the life waiting on the other side of that humiliation. Sometimes the worst thing that happens opens the door to the best thing that was always waiting. Tomorrow I would wake up in my bright little house, make coffee in my favorite mug, and continue building a life that belonged entirely to me. It was a good life, an honest life, a life worth the fight it had taken to create it. And at 75, I was just getting started.